All right, so this is floods and people. So our activity as humans have definitely impacted floods. So how have we done that? Um, we've generally have made them worse by a lot of our construction. Stream behavior recorded in the past may not be true for present or future events. So yeah, so historical data, we've changed things so much that when we're saying, like I mentioned, the 100-year flood might become more frequent than 100 years because we have changed things. Um, and flood control measures enacted by humans may reduce the effects of larger flood events. So we have floodgates. We put in levees and things that try to prevent floods, but those are really only short-term solutions. Eventually, the river is going to win. And then when like the levee breaches, you actually get much more damage. So you don't get as frequent of flooding, but you get worse flooding when it happens. As well as pavement. We're reducing the permeability of the ground when we pave everything. So we're getting more runoff, so more flash floods in the upstream areas. Dams, we're controlling the flooding downstream. There are, which is good. You want that. But then that increases erosion downstream. So let's start looking at some of this. Let's see. So here is the size of the 100-year flood. So here we have dam was built, and so the 100-year flood became smaller because we're collecting all of the water at a certain point. So this is, downstream of the flood. Here we have urban development where the size of the 100-year flood has increased. And again, a lot of that is because we are reducing the permeability and porosity of the soil. We're just not letting the water infiltrate. Um, Development in a floodplain. So there are a lot of reasons people would want to grow in a floodplain. Like it's great farm soil because it's fertilized so well. But when it floods, that's bad. Um, and so, but, um, and like I mentioned, when we're doing this and we're putting homes and buildings in floodplains, we're reducing the infiltration. The buildings can occupy volumes as shown here. When we put things in for construction, we have reduced the volume of the floodplain channel. And so now the water height is going to be higher than it would have naturally have been. Um, Storm drains, again, we're preventing naturally occurring groundwater and water infiltration and just taking all of that water that's falling pretty much directly to the stream. So then we're going to have a higher, faster stream discharge. And vegetation loss. So we talked about how plants they use the water, they prevent soil erosion, they slow the flow of runoff. So when we remove all of that natural vegetation, we are increasing the risk of flooding. Um, let's see, this is changes in stream response. Um, so here's a stream response with urbanization and the original. Okay, so this is period of rainfall. So it rained. Before people moved in, the flood would have gotten, this high. There's no numbers here. And it would have been kind of spread out. But now, with all of our construction and pavement and everything, it's rising much, much higher and much more rapidly than it would have naturally. Here's just an increasing trend from some river in North Dakota where you can see, yeah, like it's up and down. But overall, those highs are getting larger and larger, and that's just from urbanization. Uh, so what can we do? So we can, governments can say, well, you're just not allowed to build in a flood zone. We build retention ponds, which are areas where we just kind of try to direct the water. We try to catch it and flow it into a area, um, and just say, okay, nobody's going to live in this area, or we'll dig it out, or maybe it's a naturally occurring low spot and say, well, we're going to direct the water here. Diversion channel is pretty much like that, where you're taking some of the water from a larger channel and trying to, like, when it gets so high, let it flow into this other spillway, if you will, to, so it doesn't overtop its levees, or, it doesn't overtop the bank full stage. Okay. So channelization, people have messed with the channels as well. We've tried to widen, deepen, or straighten the channel. Levees will build up artificial levees to try to prevent the floods from coming over the natural levee. Now levees happen naturally. So whenever there's a flood that's high energy, there's a lot of sediment and it overflows its banks, and then the sediment and everything drops down. More of it drops closer to the channel, and the coarser grains are dropping closer to the channel, and then the more fine grain things are going to drop further out, further and further away through this floodplain. That happens naturally. So there's this natural bump that are levees here that do keep the river from overflowing to a certain height. But when we just build an artificial levee, we are preventing the ground from rising with the levee like it would naturally do. And we're also preventing the river from taking its natural meandering course and moving like it wants to. And this is what we have done in the Mississippi Delta. And so the levees are now like 15 feet high, higher than ground. So the river is like flowing above ground because we're not letting that river flow like it wants to. Which is all fine and dandy until something happens and there's a breach in the levee, and then it's just so much more disastrous than it would have been if we had let nature take its course. And here's an example of a breached levee here, and then all that water just comes rushing out really quickly. Here's the changes in profile from a dam. So the dam becomes the new base level, so we're getting a lot of sediment being dropped here, which does tend to fill up lakes behind dams much more quickly. In fact, then we spend money dredging them out and trying to get rid of all the sediment. But then on this side now, you have a lot more energy in the water because we've dropped the load here. We let some out. It has all this energy, so it starts eroding much more quickly downstream than it would have before. Oh, and how do we handle that? So we just try to release it at a controlled rate. And then here's just a map showing major floods of the 20th century, which, are all here by streams. Quite a few in Kentucky. And that is it for humans and flooding.